Bruce Lee was dominating when Bolo Yeung, a bodybuilder, claimed he was stronger, and then Bruce Lee vs. Bolo Yeung, Battle of the Titans. The Jun Fan Gung Fu Institute gym in Los Angeles was packed that afternoon. Bruce Lee, with his physique sculpted by discipline and precise movements like blades, demonstrated Wing Chun techniques to a group of attentive students. Among them, an imposing man, with muscles so defined they seemed to be carved from marble, watched with a sneer. It was Bolo Yeung, the legendary bodybuilder from Hong Kong, known as much for his brute strength as his fiery temper. Bruce Lee is fast, yes, but strength? That's what wins fights, declared Bolo, crossing his arms, his biceps swelling like balloons. I lift more weight than you on one arm. I'm stronger. And strength is what matters in the end. The students looked at each other, tense. Bruce stopped training, wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand and looked at Bolo with a calm, almost amused look. Strength is useful, Bolo. But in combat, it's not the muscle that decides. It's the mind, the technique, the adaptation. Bruce rolled his shoulders, relaxing. If you want to prove your theory, let's see. 1 round. No rules. Just you and me. Bolo laughed, a low, defiant sound. No rules? Even better. I'll show you what real strength is. The confrontation. The makeshift ring in the center of the gym was emptied. The students formed a circle, some nervous, others excited. Bruce took off his shirt, revealing a lean but defined torso, every muscle designed for explosiveness, not display. Bolo, in turn, flexed his arms, his veins bulging like thick ropes. The first attack came from Bolo. A direct punch, loaded with all his mass, aimed at Bruce's face. But the Jeet Kune Do master had already moved before the blow even came out. He slid to the side, counterattacking with a series of quick punches to Bolo's liver. The giant grunted but did not retreat. Instead, he grabbed Bruce in a bear hug, lifting him off the ground. Now you will see, growled Bolo, squeezing with all his strength. Bruce didn't fight the pressure. Instead, he relaxed his body, letting Bolo think he had the upper hand. Then, with one fluid movement, he wrapped his legs around his opponent's waist and spun, using Bolo's own momentum to topple him. The two fell to the mat, but Bruce was back on his feet before Bolo could recover. Brute force is predictable, said Bruce, circling. You depend on the size. I depend on the space between us. Bolo roared and went for it again, this time with a trip. Bruce jumped, avoiding the blow, and threw a side kick that hit Bolo's knee with a sharp crack. The giant staggered, but did not fall. Instead, he used the pain to fuel his fury, charging forward like a bull. You're fast, but I'm unbreakable. Bruce realized that Bolo wasn't going to give up. He needed a different strategy. When the next punch came, instead of dodging, Bruce moved closer, entering Bolo's guard. Before the giant could react, Bruce applied a headlock, twisting Bolo's elbow back with surgical precision. Aya! Bolo shouted, falling to his knees. Surrender, said Bruce, without cruelty, just firmness. Bolo gritted his teeth, muscles trembling under the effort of resisting. But the pain was unbearable. With one last growl of frustration, he hit the mat 3 times. Okay. You win. Bruce let go of Bolo's arm and reached out his hand to help him up. The giant, despite his defeat, did not seem humiliated. On the contrary, there was a gleam of respect in his eyes. I've never seen someone so fast, and so smart. Bolo rubbed his elbow, which was still painful. You were right. Strength isn't everything. Bruce smiled. Strength has its place. But in combat, intelligence wins over blind strength. You are strong, Bolo. But now you know you need more than muscles. The lesson beyond the fight. In the following days, Bolo Yeung returned to the gym. Not as a challenger, but as a student. Bruce, surprised but pleased, agreed to teach him not just fighting techniques, but philosophy. True strength comes from within, said Bruce one afternoon, while correcting Bolo's posture in a chi sao exercise. A man can have muscles like rocks, but if he doesn't know how to use them wisely, he'll just be a statue. You have potential, Bolo. Now you need to learn to control it. Bolo nodded, taking in every word. Over time, his approach changed. He still trained his physique, but now he combined strength with agility, power with precision. And when, years later, the two met again on the sets of Enter the Dragon, they were no longer adversaries, they were partners. In the film, the legendary fight between Lee and Bolo in the Hall of Mirrors was not just choreographed. It was a dance of mutual respect, a celebration of how two men, from such different worlds, had learned that true mastery lies not in dominating another, but in mastering oneself. And so, the rivalry turned into a legacy. The legacy beyond the screen. Years after Enter the Dragon, Bolo Yeung was no longer just the muscular villain of martial arts films. He had become a symbol, living proof that brute strength, when tempered with discipline and humility, could transform into something greater. While Bruce Lee became an immortal icon, Bolo walked his own path, away from the spotlight, but no less impact fell. His first challenge came when an old rival, a Thai fighter named Krakon the Hammer, sought him out off film sets. Krakon was not like the others. He didn't seek fame or money. He was a man driven by wounded pride, who had vowed to break beyond the lookout in a real fight, without cameras, without choreography. In the movies, you won, he said, spitting on the floor between them. But here, in the mud, we will see who the real monster is. Bolo could have refused. He could have called the police, or simply ignored the challenge. But something inside him, perhaps the same instinct that had made him face Bruce Lee years before, made him accept it. They would meet in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Hong Kong, a place where the law did not reach and honor was the only valid currency. The fight was brutal. Krakon was faster than he looked, with precise strikes that targeted Bolo's weak spots, his ribs, his knees, his throat. But Bolo was no longer the same man who had entered Lee's dojo years ago. He didn't attack with blind fury. I waited, watched, dodged. When Krakon tired, Bolo knocked him down with a single blow, not to crush him, but to immobilize him. You fight well, he said, panting. But anger is a current. One day, it will drag you under. Krakon, his face bloodied, laughed. And you? Are you still hiding behind the words of a ghost? Bolo didn't respond. I knew that Bruce Lee's ghost was not a shadow, but a light. And lights don't go out, they scatter. Redemption in the ring. The real test, however, came when Bolo was invited to participate in an underground tournament in Macau, where fighters from all over the world faced each other in fights without rules. The organizer, a former boxing promoter named Victor the Butcher Lang, had a shady history. He was said to bet against his own fighters, that he had connections to organized crime. But the cash prize was tempting, enough to guarantee a decent future for the family of a friend who had died in an accident. Bolo knew the risks. He knew that if he won, he might be forced to fight again and again until his body or soul broke. But he also knew that if he refused, he would be turning his back on something bigger than himself. In the ring, he faced a Russian named Ivan the Bear Volkov, a man as broad as he was tall, with scars that told stories of prisons and street fights. Ivan didn't fight with technique, he fought with hatred. And in the first few minutes, it seemed like hate would win. Bolo was thrown against the ropes, punched until his lips swelled, kicked until his lungs burned. But then, in the midst of the chaos, he remembered Lee's words, "Control isn't about holding your fist. It's about knowing when to let go." Bolo stopped resisting. Instead of blocking Ivan's next punch, he moved with it, using the Russian's momentum to spin and take him down with an armbar. Ivan fell like a tree, and the audience went crazy. But Be on the Lookout didn't celebrate. He approached the Russian, who was coughing blood on the ground, and held out his hand. Victor Lang didn't like this. "You didn't come here to make friends, Chinaman," he growled, as his henchmen surrounded the ring. "You came to fight." Bolo looked at him calmly. "I fought. And I won. Now I want my money." What happened next was quick. Lang pulled out a gun, but before he could fire, a voice echoed across the arena, "I don't think so, Victor." It was Mei Ling, a former fighter who Bolo had met years before, when he was still training in Hong Kong. She was not alone. Beside him, dozens of fighters, men and women who had been exploited by Lang, rose from the stands, iron bars and chains in their hands. Lang backed away, cursing. "This isn't over." "It's over for you," Mei Ling said, as the fighters advanced. Bolo took the envelope with the prize and left without looking back. He knew this wouldn't be the last time he saw Lang, but he also knew that, for the first time in a long time, he wasn't just fighting for himself. The last enemy. The years passed, and Bolo became a silent legend. He trained young fighters in a small dojo in Los Angeles, teaching not just techniques, but life lessons. "Force without purpose is like a river without a bed," he said. "She destroys everything in her path. But the past always comes back." Victor Lang reappeared, more powerful than ever, now at the head of a criminal organization that trafficked fighters for illegal fights. And he had a new target, Jake, the son of one of Bolo's former students, a 17-year-old boy with natural talent but no discipline. Lang wanted to turn it into his next money machine. Bolo couldn't allow that. He traveled to Las Vegas, where Lang had his operation. There was no audience, no cameras, no rules. Just two men in a dark warehouse, with a boy's future at stake. Lang laughed when he saw Bolo enter. "You've grown old, Chinaman. And I have a gun." Cake didn't move. "You always had a gun. But you never knew how to use it." The fight was short. Lang fired, but Bolo was already moving, dodging the bullets like raindrops. When Lang tried to fire again, the gun jammed. Bolo knocked him down with a roundhouse kick, then pinned him to the ground. "You can't kill me," Lang panted. "I have men. They will come." Bolo looked at him seriously. "I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to leave you alive so you remember what it's like to lose." He broke Lang's arm, not out of anger, but to ensure he couldn't fight again. Then he called the police. Lang was arrested, and Jake was rescued. The end and the beginning. Bolo never fought professionally again. But he also never stopped teaching. One quiet morning years later, he was in his dojo, watching a group of children training. Among them was Jake, now a strong and disciplined young man, teaching the basic movements to a slight little boy. Cake smiled. He knew his time was running out. The body no longer responded as it used to, and joint pain was a constant reminder that life is finite. But the legacy was eternal. He sat on a bench outside, watching the sunset. A gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine, and for a moment, he closed his eyes. When he opened them, he was no longer alone. Bruce Lee was there, leaning against the dojo wall, smiling. "It took a while, Cake." Bolo wasn't scared. "I knew you would come." Lee laughed. "You always knew more than you let on." They sat in silence for a while, two old friends enjoying each other's company. "What now?" asked Bolo. Lee looked up at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. "Now, you rest. And I'll keep training." Bolo nodded. "I knew it was time." And so, with the sound of children training in the background, he closed his eyes for the last time. The dojo continued to operate. Jake took Bolo's place. And somewhere beyond the screens and the rings, two masters were finally at peace. The legacy of Cake. Years passed, and Bolo Yeung's dojo stood firm, a beacon of discipline and respect amid the chaos of the city. Jake, now with gray hair and scars from battles he had never told, taught with the same patience he had learned from his master. But something had changed in him. It wasn't just the responsibility of leading the place, it was the weight of an unspoken promise. One night, after the last student had left, Jake sat on the mat, wiping the sweat from his hands with a worn towel. The wind blew against the paper windows, and the smell of incense still hung in the air. It was then that he heard it. "You still hold the bat as if you were afraid of it." Jake didn't turn around. "I knew who it was. I'm not afraid. I just don't want to break anything else." Lee laughed, the same light, sharp sound as before. He was sitting in the corner, as always, his legs crossed, his fingers playing with a coin between his knuckles. "Fear is good. It means you still have something to lose. But you're not a student anymore, Jake. You're the guardian of this place." Jake closed his eyes. He remembered the day Bolo had found him, a street kid with bloody fists and a heart full of anger. He remembered the nights the old master had told him stories of Hong Kong, of fights in dirty rings, of men who faced armies with nothing but their hands. "I'm not him," Jake said finally. "No one is. Not even me." Lee stood up, the coin disappearing in his hand. "But the dojo isn't about being equal. It's about being what you need to be." Jake took a deep breath. I knew what that meant. There was an old debt, one that Bolo had never collected, but which now weighed heavily on his shoulders. The last fight. The abandoned warehouse stank of mold and gasoline. The lights flickered, casting elongated shadows across the cracked concrete floor. Jake entered alone, his hands empty, his body relaxed. On the other side of the warehouse, a tall man in a black suit and a scar on his face waited with a cold smile. "Finally. I thought I would have to go to your neighborhood dojo to pick you up." Jake didn't respond. Just watched. The man, Viktor Kovalenko, was the latest in a line of criminals who, decades ago, had destroyed Bolo's life in Hong Kong. It hadn't been a fair fight. It hadn't been a fight, really. It had been an ambush. And now, Kovalenko was here, in New York, building an empire on the same lies and violence. "Your master should have remained in the past," said Kovalenko, twirling a metal baton in his hands. "But you're persistent. Like a dog with a bone." Jake advanced. There were no words. There was no warning. Just the sound of flesh against flesh, bones creaking under the impact. Kovalenko was strong, fast, trained by men who understood pain. But Jake struggled with something he didn't have, memory. Each blow was an echo of what Bolo had taught him. Every block, a lesson from Lee. And when Kovalenko finally fell, his face bloodied, Jake felt no triumph. Just relief. This doesn't end here," growled the man, spitting blood. Jake bent down, picking up the metal baton from the ground. For a moment, he thought about ending it all there. But then he remembered what Lee had said, the dojo isn't about killing. It's about being what you need to be. With a quick movement, he broke the bat in half and threw the pieces at Kovalenko's feet. It ends now. The end of an era. Jake returned to the dojo at dawn. The children were already arriving, their lithe little bodies jumping with excitement. He smiled, but inside, something had broken. That night, while the city slept, Jake picked up an old wooden box hidden under the tatami mat. Inside were yellowed photos, letters in Chinese, and a black banner, faded with age. The Bolo banner. He rolled it carefully and placed it on the makeshift altar in the corner of the dojo, next to a photo of Lee, smiling, and another of Bolo, Yeung, with his fists raised. "The time has come," he murmured. There was no response. But for a moment, the wind that came through the window carried the sound of distant laughter, as if two old friends were training somewhere beyond time. Jake closed his eyes. When he opened them, the dojo was empty. But he wasn't alone. And never would be again.